Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh and welcome to Ummah Radio. You are listening to the Mustalahul Hadeeth class with myself, Abu Mus'ab. Alright, so we are doing the kitab known as Muqaddimatun fi Usul al-Hadith of Mulana Abdul Haq ad-Dihlawi rahimahullah. We have done a number of lessons so far, and in our last class we had stopped at the end of page 41. The topic we were discussing were ta'liq ahadith, mu'allaq ahadith, which are narrations which are suspended. And in particular we were discussing the ta'liq narrations of Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah, which he quotes in his Sahih, and that is where we had stopped at the end of page 41. The topic continues on tonight inshallah, still on the topic of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, dealing with ta'liq, and that is where we will start now on page 42. So to begin with, Bismillahi walhamdulillahi wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah. The heading for tonight is حكم التعليق بصيغة المعلوم والمجهول. He says that what is the ruling with regards to the ta'liq narrations, in particular of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, when he uses the two ways Imam Bukhari rahimahullah refers and uses a mu'allaq hadith. One is when he will use it in an affirmative sense that definitely this is a hadith, but he's using it in a mu'allaq form. So in the sigha of ma'lum, meaning in the method that the narration is known in this case to be authentic, or wal majhul, or in an unknown sense, meaning that one thing is where you say this is certain, and one thing is where maybe there's a little bit of doubt or uncertainty. So there are these two ways that Imam Bukhari rahimahullah would quote a mu'allaq narration. But you'll see now as we continue what is meant by that. So he said, وقد يفرق فيها بأن ما ذكر بصيغة الجزم والمعلوم كقوله قال فلان أو ذكر فلان. He says that the ulama have made a distinction, or Imam Bukhari rahimahullah himself have made a distinction in his kitab when he mentions these mu'allaq narrations. So when he mentions it بصيغة الجزم والمعلوم, meaning when he mentions it with certainty and complete knowledge, like when he says so and so said or so and so mentioned, he speaks in particular this particular person, he said it. Now you'll see what the difference is when we come to the next part. He says so and so said it or so and so mentioned it. So دل على ثبوت إسناده عنده فهو صحيح قطعا. He says that when Imam Bukhari rahimahullah uses a mu'allaq hadith in this manner, that he says so and so mentioned or so and so said, and he quotes a hadith, then this points out that the sanad, the chain of narrations, is established as being authentic, definite authenticity according to Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, and therefore there's no doubt about its authenticity. Then he moves on now to the second point. He says وما ذكره بصيغة التمريض والمجهول قيل ويقال وذكر ففي صحته عنده كلام. Now the second point, the majhul point, he says that when Imam Bukhari rahimahullah mentions a mu'allaq narration, when Imam Bukhari rahimahullah mentions a mu'allaq narration بصيغة التمريض والمجهول, tamrid here would be, it's the same meaning of majhul, meaning there's some fault, there's some uncertainty, there's someone unknown or something like this when he uses it in this form. Like for example when he says qila, it was said, or yuqalu, also same meaning, it was said, or dhukira, it was mentioned, then ففي صحته عنده كلام. Then the ulama, they differ with regard to this on the authenticity of such a narration according to the standards of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. But ولكنه لما أورده في هذا الكتاب كان له أصل ثابت ولهذا قالوا تعليقات البخاري متصلة صحيحة. But because Imam Bukhari rahimahullah has mentioned it in this particular kitab, Sahih al-Bukhari, therefore it has a definite basis and established hadith, and that is why the muhaddithin have said that the mu'allaq narrations that of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah are all actually muttasil, they are all connected and they are all authentic. Now just to repeat it now and put things in perspective, when Imam Bukhari rahimahullah reports a mu'allaq narration, there's either one way that he can say, let's use a name that, let's say Abbas said, So he's using here in particular, someone in particular has said it. So therefore when Imam Bukhari puts himself like this out, that's saying so and so said it, meaning this person is known and is accepted, and that is why he uses the term that so and so said it. But when he says it has been said, who said it? Nobody knows who said it. It was said, or someone mentioned it, but who is that someone? Imam Bukhari rahimahullah don't mention it, and that is where the problem lies. So when Imam Bukhari rahimahullah mentions it like this, that it was said, or somebody, or it was mentioned, but without mentioning who did it, it's an unknown person. This type of narration is the only type where the ulama differ, that did Imam Bukhari rahimahullah consider this to be authentic or not. It's only on that particular point. But the reason why the ulama still accept the ta'liqat narrations of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah is because Imam Bukhari rahimahullah had placed down a particular principle, and his principle when starting the kitab was that la ya'ti illa bis sahih, that he will not bring about any narrations in this particular book of his but that which is authentic. So therefore every hadith that is mentioned in this kitab Sahih al-Bukhari is an authentic hadith. That is why, despite the fact that Imam Bukhari rahimahullah would mention it like it was mentioned, it was said, despite that, which would normally mean there's some bit of doubt regarding it, but because of this principle that Imam Bukhari rahimahullah had laid down, therefore despite him using it in this manner, we will still accept the hadith as being authentic, because his principle had said that he will not bring anything but that which is authentic. So this is all still to do with the ta'liqat of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. So that's the end now of the discussion with regards to ta'liq narrations. So we will move on now to the next point, which we will come across now another convergence of terms, which the term tonight is al-mursal. A mursal is also to put it in another term, is a hanging narration. There's again someone missing over here. So he says, what is a mursal hadith? He says, وَإِنْ كَانَ السُّقُوطُ مِنْ آخِرِ السَّنَدِ فَإِنْ كَانَ بَعْدَ التَّابِعِ فَالْحَدِيثُ مُرْسَلٌ. Now you may find things are sounding very similar here. Bear with me till we come to the ending. He says, a mursal is such a narration where there's somebody dropped out. So if the person is dropped out at the ending of the sanad, how is this? فَإِنْ كَانَ بَعْدَ التَّابِعِ فَالْحَدِيثُ مُرْسَلٌ. This person who is dropped out in the sanad, somebody is missing from the chain of narration, if it happens, or rather it will happen after the tabi'i. So a tabi'i is missing out the sahabi who he heard it from, then in that case the hadith will be termed as mursal. Now you may be thinking, but didn't we come across this term already before? Yes, we did come across this, not this word mursal, but we came across the same definition, that a tabi'i is narrating something from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam without mentioning the name of the sahabi. So yes, definitely we did pass that by, and you'll come across the reason for it now in a moment. So he says, فَالْحَدِيثُ مُرْسَلٌ وَهَذَا الْفِعْلُ إِرْسَالٌ. So if in the sanad the sahabi is missing and the tabi'i is narrating it directly, then this hadith will be termed as being mursal, and this action of the tabi'i narrating from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam will be called irsal. Like inqita' and ittisal and all those terms, is the same thing as irsal. Now he moves on, he says, how does this work? He says, كَقَوْلِ التَّابِعِي قَالَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. For example, if a tabi'i says that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so he misses out entirely who he heard it from, because obviously the mere fact that he is a tabi'i means that he had not seen Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now he comes the reason for why I said you will find a bit of this resembling a previous lesson of a previous term. So he says, وَقَدْ يَجِيءُ الْمُرْسَلُ وَالْمُنْقَطِعُ بِمَعْنَى وَالْإِصْطِلَاحُ الْأَوَّلِ أَشَرُ. He says that the term mursal and munqati' comes also, you will find it come many times in the same meaning as synonyms, but the usage, the istilah al-awwal, the first type of terminology, that one is the more well-known one. So mursal and munqati', maqtu', this type of munqati'. Okay, just to touch, before going to that point, let me just touch on the topic of mursal and munqati'. Munqati' we did pass by, which was a narration where someone is simply missing from the chain. Mursal also someone is missing from the chain, but Mursal is also that narration where in particular the narration where a Sahabi is missing and a Tabi'i is quoting it. So therefore the term that we had actually done previously was the term maqtu'. Now a maqtu' narration which we did was when a Tabi'i is narrating a hadith skipping out the Sahabi, just like a mawquf was where a not quite the same, but it's very much like a maqtu' narration, but the term sometimes is used as synonyms. On the point of mursal and munqati' now again, the ulama for the most part they use the terms interchangeably, but there are some ulama who make a distinction between the two terms, between mursal and munqati', and according to the ulama who make this distinction, they say that the mursal, like we know here, is someone where the sahabi is dropped, meaning at the end of the sanad someone is missing, and that someone will always be a sahabi. So therefore they make this distinction, while they say that a munqati' narration is for the most part is used for when someone is dropped out somewhere else in the chain. So in both cases someone is missing from the chain, but the mursal is when in particular a sahabi is missing, while a munqati' can be where anybody else down the line is missing from the chain. So therefore some ulama make this distinction, but other ulama would use the two terms interchangeably. Okay, now a question that what's the difference between maqtu' and mursal? Okay, the difference between maqtu' and mursal now again is only from the perspective of attribution of the hadith, because marfu', mawquf and maqtu' dealt with the attribution of a hadith, which in the sense, like, let's go back to what a mawquf was, where a sahabi did something but he did not say that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said it or did it or a particular thing. So let's say for example Hazrat Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu did something, then this would be, or he said something which obviously again we know is something which he learned from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then that is what a mawquf narration was. Now maqtu' is just now the tabi'i's version of that a tabi'i is doing something, or he is saying something which again did not come from his own self but came from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but he's using it from his side without raising the narration up and saying that it actually came from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So like I say, in the case of a maqtu', the tabi'i does something without attributing it to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, while a mursal is where a tabi'i says or does something and he attributes it directly to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, leaving out the sahabi. So in the case of maqtu', we would say the tabi'i cuts off the sahabi and he cuts off Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, while in the case of a mursal he only cuts out the tabi'i, he only cuts out the sahabi and he narrates it directly from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that is the difference between the difference between a maqtu' and a maqtu' narration and a mursal narration. It comes down to the point of ascription. Alright, so that's on the point of mursal. Okay, what's the meaning of mursal? Mursal, many of these terms, mursal is from the word, as you said risala. Yes, it's the same root words from ra, sin, lam. These are the same root letters. So the word mursal does come from there. But like I say, a mursal, these are terminologies of the muhaddithin, and they use the term mursal to distinguish between all these different terms, that a mursal narration is one which stops like this. So we don't go for a linguistic meaning in that sense, because if you were to say a mursal, linguistically Mursal would also mean a person who was sent. The Mursil is the person who sends, and the Mursal is the one who was sent. So that if you're looking from a linguistic perspective, but this is now from an istilahi perspective, the terminology of muhaddithin. So therefore the terminology meaning is a hadith which is narrated by a tabi'i but which skips out a sahabi. Alright, so that was with regards to the Mursal definition. Now we come out to how is a Mursal hadith regarded. So the chapter is Hukmul Mursal, the ruling with regards to Mursal narrations. He says, وحكم المرسل التوقف عند جمهور العلماء لأنه لا يدرى أن الساقط ثقة أو لا. He says that when it comes to the issue of a Mursal, according to the majority of the ulama, they make tawaqquf. Tawaqquf is where you don't take you basically you don't take a stance. So in a case of a tawaqquf hadith, you don't say it's authentic, nor do you say it is not authentic. You check up the narration in particular and you see what is it, but you don't have a preset rule that Mursal is either weak or Mursal is either authentic. Neither one of the two. That's the one opinion, and it says that is the opinion of the majority of the ulama. Why? لأنه لا يدرى أن ساقط ثقة أو لا. The reason being is because you don't know that the person who was dropped out, was he authentic or not. Why? And this is why he explains it right here. لأن التابعي قد يروى عن التابعي وفي التابعين ثقات وغير ثقات. The reason is because a tabi'i, he can narrate from another tabi'i from a sahabi, because as we explained earlier in one of the earlier classes, that as-sahabatu kulluhum adul, every single one of the sahaba, they are all authentic. We accept from every single last one of them. We don't say no, the sahabi is not authentic, nothing of that sort. We accept every single last sahabi. But amongst the tabi'in, there we have a different issue, and there we will look at each individual tabi'i. Now a tabi'i, if he misses out only a sahabi, everyone would accept the narration. But it's possible a tabi'i could hear it from another tabi'i who he heard it again in turn from a sahabi. So therefore, because of this uncertainty, that is why the majority of the muhaddithin, they make tawaqquf. They don't take any particular stance. They prefer to wait and check out the narration in particular and not have any preset rules with regards to it. Now, just to go on to the footnote on this particular point here, number 3, he quotes Imam An-Nawawi rahimahullah, who says, المرسل حديث ضعيف عند جماهير المحدثين والشافعي وكثير من الفقهاء وأصحاب الأصول وقال مالك وأبو حنيفة في طائفة صحيح. Now, according to Imam An-Nawawi rahimahullah here, he says that a mursal is a weak hadith according to the majority of the muhaddithin, and according to Imam Ash-Shafi'i rahimahullah as well, and according to many of the fuqaha and the usuliyin, they all are of this opinion. And Imam Malik and Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahumullah, they say that a mursal hadith is authentic. So here you can see a difference. Okay, Imam Nawawi here is saying that a mursal is by nature weak, and you have to now prove that it is not weak. While Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik rahimahumullah, they say that it is authentic, and you now have to prove it weak. That's the slight difference. But you come now, we'll continue on now to the next page, and you see the question: how do you prove that? To prove that the narration, if they say the narration is weak, then they say by nature, because we don't know who was missing, therefore the narration is automatically weak. Now you will look either from who check up through other books, are there similar narrations, or has any of the muhaddithin commented that this particular tabi'i, he only used to narrate from this one sahabi, not from anybody else. But all of this will come now in a moment as we continue with the class. But in any case, just to give in advance here, that either it can be in this form that the ulama broke it down and said, okay, this person, he only narrates like this, so therefore he did not narrate it from anybody weak, so therefore his narration would be accepted. Or there are other ahadith which are similar to this, which strengthen this, and therefore it becomes authentic as well. Or alternatively, obviously, if you say the hadith is authentic, then you would then look. If we take the view of Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik rahimahumullah, and we say by nature the hadith is authentic, then even amongst authentic narrations, there are levels of authenticity, and if one authentic narration contradicts another authentic narration which is stronger than this one, then the more stronger one will take precedence. So if this Mursal narration contradicted another more authentic hadith, then the more authentic one would take preference over this one. So there's a lot of process to go through before the ulama would finally grade a hadith. Is it definitely authentic or definitely weak? But here he's just laying a ground, general, unrestricted law that when we see a Mursal hadith, what do we say? Is it authentic or is it not authentic? This is what he was dealing with over here. So coming back to where we were on page 43, after mentioning that we don't know who the dropped out person was, because a tabi'i can report from a tabi'i, and amongst the tabi'in there are those who are thiqa, they are trustworthy, they are authentic and reliable, and there are also those who are ghayru thiqat, who are not trustworthy, meaning we can't rely on their narrations. Now he comes to the point of Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik rahimahumullah. He says, وعند أبي حنيفة ومالك رحمهم الله المرسل مقبول مطلقا. Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik rahimahumullah, they are of the view that a Mursal hadith is accepted unrestrictedly. When we come across a Mursal hadith, it's fine for accepting. And this is the point also, that according to the Hanafi and the Maliki madhabs, a Mursal hadith is sufficient to be used as a hujjah. It's enough, you can use it as a proof in the sharia to establish something. So while obviously the other muhaddithin who regard it as weak would say that you can't use it to establish something, because no rule can be based on a weak narration. So there's a slight difference. But we continue on. He says, وهم يقولون إنما أرسله لكمال الوثوق والاعتماد. Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik rahimahullah, their justification and explanation is, they say that the reason why the tabi'i dropped out this person is لكمال الوثوق والاعتماد, is because he is completely reliable and trustworthy. لأن الكلام في الثقة, because we're talking now about authenticity and reliability of people. ولو لم يكن عنده صحيحا لم يرسله ولم يقل قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. He says that because this person left out the obviously who he heard from, whether it's from a sahabi, then we obviously don't bother because the sahaba are all authentic. Or if he left out the name of a tabi'i, then it's because he considered him completely trustworthy and reliable, and that's all what we're actually dealing with the reliability and authenticity of a narrator. And he says that, or rather Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik rahimahumullah, they say that if this dropped out person, this tabi'i for example, who was dropped out and whose name was not mentioned, if this other tabi'i who is narrating the hadith, if he didn't regard that person to be authentic, he would not narrate a Mursal hadith and just go straight and say that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said so. So the fact that he's okay, just to repeat this last bit again, let me give the people names, then it makes it a bit easier to understand. So here we have Abdullah who's narrating a hadith, and Abdullah could have heard this hadith from Muhammad, who heard it from, for example, Hadrat Abu Huraira radiyallahu anhu, or he could have narrated it from Hadrat Abu Huraira radiyallahu anhu directly. In the case where he heard it directly from Hadrat Abu Huraira radiyallahu anhu, then without question the narration would be accepted, because everyone is in agreement that the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum are all acceptable, trustworthy and authentic, and there's no one who can place a blemish on their characters. So if he's narrating directly from a Sahabi, well and good, there's no complaint over there. But because of the possibility that he could have heard it from Muhammad, who heard it again from a Sahabi, and Abdullah did not hear it directly from a Sahabi. Because of this, that is where this difference of opinion comes in. So if he heard it from Muhammad, then it's because he considered he heard it from Muhammad, and Abdullah now, who heard this narration from Muhammad, he quotes it directly and says that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. He leaves out the Sahabi, knowing full well that the Sahaba are all 100% reliable, but he also leaves out the name of Muhammad as well, who is a tabi'i like him. Why? Because he considers Muhammad to be of the utmost authenticity. That is why he felt confident enough to attribute the hadith directly to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam without having to mention the name of Muhammad. So this is what Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik rahimahullah use as the dalil, the reasoning behind why a mursal narration is acceptable. But this is also not every mursal hadith, as you will see now in a moment. So that was the view of Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik rahimahumullah. Now we come to the next one, which is Imam Ash-Shafi'i rahimahullah. He says, وعند الشافعي رحمه الله إن اعتضد بوجه آخر مرسل أو مسند وإن كان ضعيفا قبل. Imam Ash-Shafi'i rahimahullah, he says that if a mursal narration comes along, but it is supported by any other narration, whether that other narration is mursal or whether it is not mursal. Here, musnad mean it is not, there's no one missing, it's a complete linked, the sanad is complete. That is what a musnad narration, a musnad is. So it's whether it's mursal or whether it's musnad, whether there's somebody dropped from the chain or whether the chain is complete, authentic, all joined up, despite the fact that the narration may be weak, despite that it will be accepted. So according to Imam Ash-Shafi'i rahimahullah, he just wants some secondary source to prove this narration. Whether it's a weak narration, whether it's a mursal narration, whether it's authentic narration, that's not what he's concerned with. He wants to just know that somebody else has reported it as well. So let's say Imam Ash-Shafi'i rahimahullah, by default he considered a mursal hadith to be weak, but now here comes along another mursal narration on the same topic. Then in this case, Imam Ash-Shafi'i rahimahullah would say that these two are sufficient to give strength to one another, and therefore he would accept such a mursal narration and obviously raise it up to the level of acceptability and sufficient to be used as proof as well. So that is the view now of Imam Ash-Shafi'i rahimahullah. And then lastly, وَعَنْ أَحْمَدَ قَوْلَانِ. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, two views are reported from him. Now we'll go quickly, before coming to that point, we'll go to footnote number 1 and number 2, and you'll understand it a bit more better over here. Okay, actually before we come to footnote number 2, to continue on from the previous footnote where we did that, Imam An-Nawawi rahimahullah had mentioned that the mursal hadith is weak according to the majority of the muhaddithin, and so too Imam Ash-Shafi'i and many of the fuqaha and also the usuliyin, they all held this opinion. And Imam Malik and Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, amongst a group of others, they said that a mursal hadith by default is authentic. The footnote actually continues onwards here to page 43, which then said, وقال ابن حجر فإن عرف من عادة التابع أنه لا يرسل إلا عن ثقة فذهب جمهور المحدثين إلى التوقف لبقاء الاحتمال، أي احتمال صحته وضعفه. Then he says انظر شرح نخبة الفكر. He says, he quotes now Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah, who said that if it is known that it's from the habit of this particular tabi'i that he does not mention mursal narrations except from someone who is thiqa, meaning he is trustworthy and reliable, then the majority of the muhaddithin, they take the opinion of making tawaqquf, of not saying it's authentic or unauthentic. Why? لبقاء الاحتمال, because this possibility still exists, أي احتمال صحته والضعف, that the possibility it could be authentic or it could be weak. Because of this possibility, they still don't take a stance. They don't say it's authentic, nor do they say it is weak. You say, for reference, you can see the kitab Sharh Nukhbat al-Fikr, and that is just, it is the Maktaba al-Ghazali print, page 67. In any case, that's that point. Now we move on to footnote, the actual footnote number 1 of this particular page, which dealt with the quote of Imam Ash-Shafi'i rahimahullah. He says, نص الشافعي على أن مرسلات سعيد بن المسيب حسان. He says that Imam Ash-Shafi'i rahimahullah, he has mentioned that the Mursal narrations of the Tabi'i Sa'id ibn al-Musayyab, all his narrations are Hasan. Hisan is the plural of the word Hasan. So when we're talking about a single one hadith is Hasan, the many hadith are Hisan. So Hisan is just the plural of Hasan. قالوا لأنه تتبعها فوجدها مسندة والله أعلم. It's mentioned here that Imam Ash-Shafi'i rahimahullah, he mentioned that the Mursal narrations of the Tabi'i Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib are Hasan. Why? The ulama say the reason why is because Imam Ash-Shafi'i rahimahullah, he investigated these narrations, these Mursal narrations of Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib, and he found all these narrations to be musnada, meaning that there was no one untrustworthy who was dropped out, meaning it was a Sahabi who was dropped out, and the Sahaba are all authentic, so therefore there's no harm in accepting the Mursal narrations of the Tabi'i Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib. Now this is what I mentioned earlier, that not every Mursal narration is accepted, even according to Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik rahimahumullah, and you'll see here now in a moment the reason for it. He says, والذي عول عليه كلام في الرسالة وهو أن مراسيل كبار التابعين حجة إن جاءت من وجه آخر ولو مرسلة. He says that the relied upon view which is mentioned in the kitab of Imam Ash-Shafi'i rahimahullah known as Ar-Risala, he mentions that the marasil is plural of the word mursal. The marasil of the kibar tabi'in, the major tabi'in. Now the tabi'in, again, they're broken down into 3 ages, 3 levels. The kibaru tabi'in, the major tabi'in who lived very close to the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum. Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib is one of them. Then you have the sigharu, the awsatu tabi'in, the middle layer of tabi'in who lived a bit after the former generation. They still of the tabi'in, but the Sahaba were a little bit older by then, meaning this middle tabi'i could narrate from one to other tabi'in before reaching a sahabi, or narrating from one tabi'i as a general rule before reaching a sahabi. And then you have sigharu tabi'in. You have the young tabi'in who were there when the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum were old and passing away. So they were very few. So these tabi'in, they most of the time they narrate from another tabi'i. As a general rule, they'll always be narrating from another tabi'i before reaching a sahabi. Maybe they have 1, 2, 3, 4 narrations here and there, but as a general rule, they would be narrating from another tabi'i before reaching a sahabi. So amongst the tabi'in, you have the old ones, the middle ones, and the young ones. So there's 3 levels. So here Imam Ash-Shafi'i rahimahullah is speaking on the top level. He says the marasil of the kibaru tabi'in, the top level of tabi'in, their mursal narrations are a proof in ja'at min wajhin akhara walau mursala, that if they have mentioned a mursal narration and it is supported, this is the same view he mentioned earlier, that if it is supported from another angle, even from another mursal narration, then it will be strengthened and be sufficient to be used as a hujjah, as a proof. أو اعتبرت بقول الصحابي أو أكثر العلماء. Furthermore, even if there is not another hadith for it, but this mursal narration is strengthened by the statement of a sahabi. So we have the action or a statement of a sahabi that maybe Hazrat Ali radiyallahu anhu said XYZ, and it supports a mursal narration, then this statement of the sahabi will give strength to that narration in the view of Imam Ash-Shafi'i rahimahullah, and therefore that mursal narration would be raised up to the level of obviously no longer being da'if but rather being hasan, and therefore being suffices to be used as a hujjah, as a proof in the sharia. Or he says, أو أكثر العلماء, or the majority of the ulama, they are of this particular opinion which is mentioned in a mursal narration. So obviously not the ulama don't come all together on something which is weak and baseless. So therefore, despite the fact that it may be mursal, but because most of the ulama are of this opinion, they gathering of so many ulama on this particular point is sufficient to give strength to this Mursal narration and also raise it up to the level, higher level of authenticity, as this being basically a Hasan Hadith. Or he says, أو كان المرسل لو سمى لا يسمى إلا ثقة فحينئذ يكون مرسله حجة ولا ينتهض إلى رتبة المتصل. So he said now, there's a few ways of how a Mursal narration can be accepted and be used as proof. One, if it's strengthened with another narration, even though it may be Mursal as well, or it's strengthened by a statement of a Sahabi, or it's strengthened by a big group of ulama supporting it as well, or being of the same view. Or he says, the Mursil, the person who is making irsal, the person who is narrating the hadith, that meaning the tabi'i, who is narrating it directly from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, law samma, if you were to mention the name of the person who is narrating from, la yusammi illa thiqa, if you were to name the person, then he would not name except someone who is authentic. Does he just, to put it in another way, meaning he only report Mursal narrations from genuinely authentic people. So in a case like this, he says, فَحِينَئِذٍ يَكُونُ مُرْسَلُهُ حُجَّةٌ. Then in this case, his Mursal narration will be sufficient to be used as a proof, وَلَا يَنْتَهِضَ إِلَى رُتْبَةِ الْمُتَّصِلِ. But despite that, this hadith, it will be used as a proof, but it won't be taken up to the level of muttasil. We won't call it a muttasil, but it will still be in a mursal form, but it will suffice to be used as proof. Then he continues, he says, وقال الشافعي وأما مراسيل غير كبار التابعين فلا أعلم أحدا قبلها. Now this is where the point I mentioned earlier, that not all mursal narrations are accepted according to everyone, just as a general rule. He says, Imam Ash-Shafi'i rahimahullah, he has said that the marasi, the mursal narrations of other than the kibaru tabi'in, other than the top level of tabi'in, Imam Ash-Shafi'i rahimahullah said, I don't know of anyone who has accepted it. And this comes from the kitab Al-Ba'ithul Hadeeth, which is Sharh Ikhtisar Ulum al-Hadith of Imam Ibn Kathir rahimahullah. So that's if you want the reference for that particular point over there. But here, in a nutshell, just to repeat, Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik rahimahullah, as a general rule, they accept a Mursal hadith. Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, he wants some further proof to strengthen a Mursal hadith. So his ones can be strengthened either by another authentic or a Mursal hadith, or it's strengthened by a statement of a Sahabi, or strengthened by the majority of the ulama supporting it, or if the person who is reporting this Mursal hadith, if he were to mention the name of the person who is narrating, who is narrating from, whose name he is not mentioning at the moment, and that person is someone thiqa, meaning he only reports from trustworthy people, then in that case also his Mursal narration will be raised up to a higher level of authenticity. Now that was the point of Imam Ash-Shafi'i. Now there was the second footnote, which was وَعَنْ أَحْمَدَ قَوْلَانِ. There were two views reported from Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, which was not mentioned in the book, but here you see footnote number 2 tells you what it is. So footnote number 2 says أي أنه ضعيف. The first view of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah is that a Mursal narration is weak, it's ضعيف. والثاني وهو أشهرها أنه صحيح. The second view of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah is that a Mursal narration, and it says وَهُوَ أَشْهَرُهَا, and this is the more well-known view of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, that a Mursal narration is actually authentic. So Imam Ahmad, in his more authentic or more well-known narration, Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik rahimahumullah are all on one page in acceptance of a Mursal narration, and Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah is not very far behind either. He just has a bit more conditions that needs to be met, and this can be found in the Kitab Tadrib al-Rawi in this particular print, volume 1, page 198. Coming back to the lesson again, he says وَهَذَا كُلُّهُ إِذَا عَلِمَ أَنَّ عَادَةَ ذَلِكَ التَّابِعِ أَلَّا يُرْسَلَ إِلَّا عَنِ الثِّقَاتِ. This is the same which Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah had mentioned. He said that all of this is only when it is known that it is the habit of that particular tabi'i that he does not mention any hadith as being mursal illa ani thiqat, except from such people who are reliable and trustworthy. وإن كانت عادته أن يرسل عن الثقات وعن غير الثقات. But if it is his habit that he reports from people who are thiqa and people who are not thiqa as well, meaning he reports from reliable and unreliable people as well. And now, in this case, you're sitting with a bit of a problem. So what does he say in this issue over here? وعن غير الثقات فحكمه التوقف بالاتفاق كذا قيل. Then in a case like this, where everyone is this person, he narrates from authentic people and he also narrates from people who are not thiqa. So in a case like this, then what he mentions over here is the bil ittifaq, there's unanimity that such a narration where the ulama will make tawaquf, they will not take a stance regarding it, they will not say it's authentic, nor will they say that it is weak. They will check it out and then they will decide, see, is it weak because there's no supporting evidences, or are there supporting evidences, in order to now make it authentic. And he says kada qila, that is how it has been mentioned. Now on that point there's a footnote again, footnote number 1, so we can come down. He says وجاء في شرح نخبة الفكر أن الراوي إذا كان يرسل عن الثقات وغيرهم فلا يقبل مرسله اتفاقا. He says that it comes in شرح نخبة الفكر that the rawi, the narrator, إذا كان يرسل عن الثقات وغيرهم, if he mentions mursal narrations from the people who are thiqa and also from those who are not thiqa, then his mursal narration will not be accepted according to ittifaq, meaning according it is unanimity, such a person's narration will not be accepted. And then lastly he says وفيه تفصيل أزيد من ذلك ذكره السخاوي في شرح الألفية, and there's a lot more detail on that point, and that if a person wants more, you can refer to the kitab of Imam As-Sakhawi rahimahullah. He has spoken and dealt with it in the kitab Sharh al-Alfiyya, which is a sharh of the Alfiyya, a kitab written by Hafidh al-Iraqi rahimahullah on the science of hadith, and Imam As-Sakhawi rahimahullah wrote an explanation on that particular kitab. So if you want further details, you can reference that, you can refer to that kitab inshaAllah. Alright, so basically like he says here that وَهَذَا أَصَّحُ مِمَّا قَالَهُ الْمُؤَلِّفِ, last footnote thing, that according to Mawlana Salman Nadwi, he prefers this view which Imam Ibn Hajar rahimahullah has mentioned, that a mursal narration from a tabi'i who reports from authentic and unauthentic people as well in a mursal form, then in this case there's unanimity that his narrations will not be accepted. But according to the view of Mulana Abdul Haq Dihlawi, he says with unanimity his narration, such a tabi'i's narrations will be looked at from a point of tawakkuf. We won't take a stance, we'll check out the narration and then make up our mind thereafter. So then that's the end of the point with regards to mursal narrations, and inshallah we will stop on this point here, and in our next class we can continue on from the next point, which is al-mu'adal. Alright, so we will be stopping at this point, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask your questions now. Okay, we have the first question over here. Question is, you mentioned about 3 stages of tabi'in. So even if a Muslim has just seen a Sahabi, they will be classed as a tabi'i. Okay, when it comes to the issue of what makes a person a tabi'i, it's very much similar to what makes a person a sahabi. So those conditions, that you have to be a Muslim and see you have to be a Muslim and see Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam like this, then you only became a sahabi. If you were a kafir and then after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, then you accepted Islam, then despite the fact that you had seen Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but you are not a sahabi. Why? Because you didn't accept Islam, or rather you didn't see Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a state of Islam. So Similar with a tabi'i. If a tabi'i has seen a sahabi, despite the fact that he may not have narrated from a sahabi, but he was a Muslim and he saw a sahabi, then in that case he will be classed as a tabi'i. So just very much the same, seeing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and seeing a tabi'i. It's not necessary to narrate a hadith from a sahabi in order to be classed as a tabi'i. So many people who may have not narrated anything from the sahaba, but they had seen the sahaba, whether it's from a distance, whatever, but they were present while the sahaba radiallahu anhum used to speak, give lessons and things like that, then in that case those people would be termed as being tabi'in. Wallahu a'lam. Okay, next question. What were all four imams, tabi'in or tabi'in? Okay, when it comes to this question over here, the one imam who is a tabi'i is Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. The only one who is confirmed definite as a tabi'i is Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. With the ulama mentioned that for certain Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah met 6 sahaba radiyallahu anhum. Other narrations mention that Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah had seen at least about 20 something sahaba, but there's difference of opinion on the authenticity of those narrations again. But for certain he saw at least 6 sahaba, and in fact Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah narrates certain hadith from some sahaba. So Imam Abu Hanifa, he was from the very last age when there were very few sahaba left over, but there was still sufficient sahaba around for him to narrate from them. So therefore Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah is a tabi'i. Imam Malik rahimahullah was born a couple of years later than Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, but there is no authentic mention of Imam Malik rahimahullah having met a sahabi. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah was born in the year 80 after Hijrah, while Imam Malik rahimahullah was born 10 years later. So by that time, it's possible there may have been 1-2 sahaba still left around, but the thing is, it's not just having lived in the same time, but there has to be authentic mention that you heard or you met or you saw a sahabi in order to be classed as a tabi'i. And no mention has been made of Imam Malik rahimahullah having met any of the sahaba. Therefore Imam Malik rahimahullah, having seen obviously all the tabi'in around him, he would then be a tabi'u tabi'in. And Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, and obviously Imam Ahmad rahimahullah as well, the three of them, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad, the three of them were atba'u tabi'in. They were the followers of the tabi'in, but not from the tabi'in. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah lived first, and in the same year Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah passed away, the year 150 after Hijrah. That was the very same year Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah was born. So obviously it's quite a bit of a lengthy, as you can say, gap between the time when there were so few sahaba at the time of Imam Abu Hanifa compared to by the time Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah was born. And Imam Ahmad rahimahullah again was the student of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah. So the last of the 4 imams was actually Imam Ahmad. First being Imam Abu Hanifa, second Imam Malik, third Imam Shafi'i, and last Imam Ahmad rahimahullah. So the only one who was actually a tabi'i was Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. Wallahu a'lam. Alright, third question. The students of knowledge have to memorize the whole sanad in their ahadith dars. Before this class I didn't know chain of narration was this important to be mentioned. As far as it goes in the madaris today, no one memorizes the whole sanad as part of their actual classes. Obviously, if you memorize the chain very well, very good, it's something that you should at least try to memorize 1-2 narrations, or at least when it comes to the science of hadith, when a person, let's say you learn Bukhari, you study Sahih al-Bukhari, how it has been for the last few centuries is that I would narrate from my ustad, who narrates from his ustad, from his ustad, from his ustad, and we would go up like that, maybe 10 people or more in the chain, before we actually reached this one of the ai who, as you would say, heard 1-2 ahadith from a different chain. or okay, let me just repeat what I mean, is that we can take the entire Sahih al-Bukhari, every single last hadith within it, and follow it up without chain to Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, and only from the point of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah will it branch off. Imam Bukhari narrating from Qutayba ibn Sa'id, from this person, from that person. So it's one chain right up to Imam Bukhari, and then it's split off into different directions. While if you look, like, let's take Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he don't hear two hadith from the same person. Okay, he has many from the same person, but he has a hadith from this person with a different chain, that person with a different chain, that person from with a different chain. So you have one general chain that you would be you to your teacher, right up till it reach Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, and that is something that a person should be able to memorize and know their own chain of narration. And obviously you'll have a different one for each of the different books of hadith, but that's at that point. But to memorize the entire Sahih al-Bukhari, 7,000 and something ahadith from memory, knowing the entire chains of narration, that is something which is extremely difficult, and no madrasa puts it down as a condition upon any of the students to be able to memorize, or to have to memorize the ahadith in that manner. Yes, the Darul Ulooms, I know they do put down a certain amount, maybe 20 ahadith you should memorize with the chain, but when they tell it to you, you must memorize it with the chain, then they simply mean from Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, from his chain up. So you have maybe Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he reports from, like I say, from Qutayba ibn Sa'id, or even narrates from Imam Muslim ibn Hajjaj, or Imam Muslim narrates it from Imam Bukhari, and that 1, 2, 3, 4 people reaches a Sahabi, and then from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So a certain amount like that, the madaris do put on a person and say you should memorize that. But as a general ruling in the class, you are not required to memorize the sanad of each and every single hadith. And yes, definitely the chain of narration is extremely important, but because of today, the time we live in today, where the books of hadith are, or rather the hadith are contained within books. Sahih al-Bukhari is there, the chains are there, nobody can change it. So too Sahih Muslim and Tirmidhi, Abu Dawud, Nasa'i, Ibn Majah, Bayhaqi, Hakim, and all the other books of hadith, because it exists. So the point of the sanad has not, okay, I wouldn't say it's lost importance, but it's not as important or as it was in the beginning days, because I may be unreliable, my teacher may be unreliable, the next man's teacher may be unreliable, and all things of the sort like that, but it will not change the authenticity of the hadith that we are reporting, which comes from Sahih al-Bukhari. And in fact, the whole point of a sanad is to see the authenticity of a narration. So if I am unreliable, it does not mean the hadith which comes in Sahih al-Bukhari is unreliable. So from that angle, the hadith, the sanad, is not as important as it was back in the days of before, where a hadith would only be reported through a chain of narration. So from that angle, it's not as important, but the sanad is still, from the other angle of being a sanad, is still as important as it was back then. Wallahu a'lam. Alright then, seeing if there are no further questions, we will end on this point here, inshallah. So until next time, we have stopped here, like I said, on page 44. We will start next time with the point of al-mu'adal, and that will be again next Tuesday, inshallah, at 7:30 p.m. GMT, 8:30 p.m. BST. So until then, we end for now, and we say, وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد سبحان الله وبحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.